do you think that her sentiment originates from, as what she says, from her retrospection of the world affairs in the past few years that give her the need to show compassion to the world?
Yeah, you're so right on that matter. First of all, I want to redefine your question. I think I've actually read through that article from like 三联周刊, right? That freaking PR article. I think she said like in the past year, she was doing some like retrospection about affairs. I don't think it was necessarily the world affairs. I feel like more was about like personal affairs around herself, especially about her career, especially about like where she can get her freaking exceptionally high payroll. So let's start from the ground. If you actually go check in her LinkedIn profile, I think her last job before the Harvard Kennedy School was a private credit department at an investment platform. So what exactly is her thinking in the past years? Was she thinking about, okay, after COVID, some of her clients, their wealth had some contraction, so she couldn't make that much commission out of it anymore? Or was because, especially after COVID, those Western nations, the USA, the United States Federal Reserve, they flourished, they flooded the market with, the tremendous amount of debt or tremendous amount of easy credits. Maybe that inflated the wealth of her clients. Then maybe she was happy, retrospecting, thinking about, okay, well, now I can make more money out of that. And like the way which she was making money, the way which she was extracting the wealth out of people was connected with the US Federal Reserve's action. They used the credit to flood the market and further widen the income gap between the 99% of the normal people versus like 1%, the top rich ones. That's the first thing to start with. Then the other thing is her retrospection might be because she was worried. She sensed the danger. Why? Because we see the Trump rising, we see the MAGA rising. From the Chinese perspective, of course, Trump was targeting China. We object that. We reject that. We don't like that. However, Trump has also done something which we should cherish, which we ordinary Chinese should cherish. Because Trump's movement, his MAGA movement, was also trying to crack down these globalists, these so-called globalist elites. Because what they want to do is that they want to extract the profits out of Americans' pockets. They also want to extract the profits out of Chinese pockets. They have no national loyalty to any group, to anyone. That's the reason why I see from some of the comments from our audience, some of them were asking very naive questions. They were like, oh, she is a Chinese. She didn't say anything bad about China. Why would we as Chinese bashing her? I think I have to explain this very well. I bet 100% she does not regard herself as a Chinese. She regards herself as a special class. It's a special class that transcends the national borders, transcends any national sovereignty, transcends any national loyalty. She's not American, nor she's a Chinese. She thinks herself as a Davos man or Davos woman. Or according to their point, the world doesn't even need to have men and women. Even the distinction between men and women, which used to be a perfect combination, which used to be men and women perfectly complement with each other, even that line has been blurred, has been demolished by those Davos elites. Then the world only has two groups of people. One is them, the Davos man, the Davos elites, which Luana Zhang aspires to be one of them. Then the rest of the group are all of the people around the world, including us. That's her point. The third point here is that if you also check her LinkedIn profile, you could see, I think her first job right after undergrad was at the Credit Suisse, which was an investment banking giant based in Switzerland. But that company was bankrupted, I think, in 2023. What we could see was that these like tremendous high financial leverage firms in the Wall Street or in all the other places around the world, they've been trying to suck the blood out of us ordinary people. However, that investment banking giant itself was bankrupted due to its very risky investment behaviors. You could see that. So I bet her retrospection was like, okay, now I don't get a job at the investment banking anymore. What should I do? I guess that's even the reason why she applied to the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, trying to say that, okay, she wants to pivot, transform into a like NGO person, not because out of her compassion, not because suddenly one day she wakes up, she wants to save the world. No, she was thinking, okay, now the road to wealth has been closed in the investment banking. then what else I should do? Honestly, as an ordinary person like you and me and all of the rest of the people, the normal people, if you encounter a situation like that, you should be actually reflecting about, okay, this huge investment banking giant just get bankrupted. What's the rationale behind that? Is there any, intrinsic nature, the intrinsic flaws about this Western capitalist system? And is there any agenda? Is there any approach? Is there any policy directions which we could come up with that could reshape this global economy system? That so in the future, we will not have that much financial crisis. We will not have that much huge wealth gap. We will not have that much, distinction between the wealthy and the non-wealthy people. That's the actual issue a nice person or a compassionate person should be thinking about. But I bet she wasn't thinking about that. So to summarize this point, basically, I think Luana Zhang, for the past years, especially after COVID, the economy was contracting in the entire world. She was thinking, where is the next route which she could get her huge payroll from? Since these financial Wall Street elites, they themselves couldn't even deal with the challenge or the complex problems which they face. Now, people like Luana Zhang was thinking, okay, I have to think about my exit strategy. Then the NGO becomes her exit strategy. So she could continually standing on the morally righteous ground, praising the rest of us while grabbing the benefits out of our pockets in a very silent manner.
Okay, but it is also true, despite everything, that she is indeed the first Chinese woman to take the podium of Harvard's commencement speech. So what is wrong with that? Because it is a factual issue.
If she wants to bring up the feminist agenda or the women's empowerment according to Chairman Mao's logic, I would agree with that, right? Chairman Mao once said that our female comrades could uphold half of the sky, right? I think that logic was to cherish the hardworking nature of those Chinese women. These are the traditional values which we cherish. However, Luana Zhang always emphasized about, being the first Chinese woman to be standing at that stage. That exactly is the American deep state, their agenda, the globalist agenda. It's literally straight out from the playbook of the American identity politics. I will give you just two very extreme examples, and you could see. The first one is Hillary Clinton. You could see when she was running the 2016 presidential election with Donald J. Trump, she was always bashing about, Trump was anti-women. She was always, using these identity politics, gender, the man versus women or women versus man, using these attacks to try to divide people, trying to stir up the trouble, stir up the hatred among different groups of people. Then the other example is Kamala Harris. I think any rational human being could see that Kamala Harris is such an outrageous figure that she's totally out of her mind. However, a person like that could even be the vice president of the United States and could even be potentially running for the president of the USA. You could see how pathetic or, how ironic is that. We all know that Kamala Harris is on drug. She's never qualified. And the only reason she was being put on that stage by the American deep state and also by these globalist elites was because, okay, she's a woman. And these globalist elites, they were trying to play the women card to manipulate the rest of us, to manipulate the public opinion, to divide us, to make us hate each other, only according to our gender or according to our ethnic profiles. That lady, Luana Zhang, she was always bragging about how she cares about the welfare of the females, how she cares about the suffering of the women. But I just have very one simple question. What exactly she did for these women? What exactly she did for the suffering of these women, of these unprivileged women? Because that does exist. I think that phenomenon, some of the women, they are due to their education background, due to their family background, or even due to their age, receiving some unfair treatment in the society. I think that's true. But there are also men which were suffering from that as well. I think that's a pervasive phenomenon across cultures, across nations. But what exactly she did to these people? She did nothing. And I can assure you this. These Western educated feminists, which there are a bunch of them in China as well right now, their whole narrative about female empowerment, the women empowerment, was only trying to grab the benefits for themselves. I bet they do not give a single inch of damn about these suffering people in the Indian countryside or in other places. The only thing they care about is if they can get promoted at Wall Street from director level to the managing director level. If they can get promoted from a vice president to a president level in a multinational companies based in Lujiazui. That is exactly their agenda. The real female empowerment, I think our Chairman Mao said very well. Chairman Mao said, women could uphold half of the sky. That was to cherish the hardworking nature of the Chinese women, right? We should all cherish that. But that is not these feminist agenda ones. These Western feminist agenda, they only want to divide our society. They want to overthrow our nation. The real female empowerment comes from the mutual respect between men and women, comes from the reciprocal mutual cooperation from a man and a woman. The way they form the family, the way they raise their children, the way they contribute to the well-being of the society. The West has no position to judge China's so-called women issue. Why? Look at this. China, among all the nations in the world right now, is the most equal nation regarding the male and female gender. Look at the West. When a woman is going to marry a Western man, she has to change her last name. She has to change her family name to adhere to the family name of that man. Then how does the West command any position to judge us? And how dare the West educate people like Luana Zhang to freaking preach us?
So how about her outfit that was being criticized? So Manchu is part of the Chinese culture as well. So what is wrong with that?
Of course, we are actually not saying there is something wrong with Manchu culture, because Manchu is the ethnicity of our Chinese nation. However, I think what's wrong with that was like all the way from her appearance, her makeup, and to the dress. She was literally just trying to convey a biased message to the West. She was trying to appeal to the Western audience, because that is exactly the Western people's imagination about China. They imagine China as a very backward nation. So people have very, tiny eyes, like that. That's the Western's biased perception toward us. And her whole dress, all the way from her dress to her makeup, was trying to appeal to that. If you go watch the movie called like Dr. Fu Manchu, that was literally the Western bias against China, saying that, all these Chinese people are very evil people with very evil intentions, and they have, tiny eyes, very yellow colors. That's why they call us the yellow race. Honestly, does our skin tone look like yellow? No. Sometimes we're actually even whiter than the white people. We are whiter than the Americans. That's just a fact. So basically, she wasn't trying to communicate the Chinese culture to the world. She wasn't trying to broadcast our Chinese culture, our Chinese virtue to the world. She was only trying to appeal to the Western bias. There's another great example of that. The mayor of Boston called Michelle Wu, and she was born in the USA. Look at her appearance. Look at her makeup. It's also exactly the same playbook. It's a same playbook which these Western elites want to see. They want to see the Chinese or ethnic Chinese as, like those Tongus people, very tiny eyes and very yellow skin colors. Their profile matches exactly with that. As I said, I bet Luana Zhang, she was only trying to appeal to the audience. She doesn't think she's a Chinese. In the USA, she was saying, you see, I'm among the American elites, but I also have a Chinese exotic culture. So that's a plus point for me. Then once she's in China, she wouldn't think she's a Chinese. She would only be thinking, okay, her background is Chinese, but she's Western educated. So that means, again, she's above us. So she has no national loyalty to any side, to each side, not to Americans, not to Chinese. She only has a loyalty to those Davos people, to the Wall Street, to the Silicon Valley, to those, financial elites. That's the loyalty which she has. That's the message she was trying to convey. She wasn't using her uniform. She wasn't using her makeup to communicate, to become a culture ambassador for China. No, she was performing a show, a stage show for the Western audience, and to please them and to make sure to confirm their bias toward China, so that these Western people will still be thinking, okay, we Chinese, we dress like that all day long. We Chinese, we are still a pre-modern society. And we Chinese, we all have, very tiny eyes, yellow skins that are due to undernutrition, that all of Chinese are still living under the $1 per day poverty line. That's what she was trying to say. But I have one comment, which is the outcome, which is the final destiny for these people. I think President Vladimir Putin said it very well. I think it was around 2022 or 2023. He said it very well. He said these Western-leaning people, not even Western-leaning, these people who sold their souls to the Wall Street, to the global financial elites, or the global Jewish interest groups, that they are just mere consumables. They thought themselves as a special material or special type of human species that transcends above the rest of us. But in reality, they are only the consumables for the Wall Street, which means now they are being used by the Wall Street as a pawns, to infiltrate China, to infiltrate us. But one day, once their evil master from the Wall Street or from Davos think that she has no value anymore, she will be disposed immediately. That's the people like her's destiny. They are consumables. Now I salute to President Putin.
You mentioned that the American Wall Street wants to turn Chinese people into consumables, but America is actually severing its ties with the Wall Street, with President Trump, to his isolationism. And shouldn't China, instead of also jumping on the bandwagon and criticize all those NGOs, should we just embrace people like her so that we can replace America as the world's superpower in terms of soft power?
First of all, you see, even though Trump is our enemy, even though Trump is using all these tech wars, finance wars, and the trade wars against us, but I think there are some common points which we Chinese we share with Trump's MAGA movement. Because now you could see that Trump's agenda, he has clearly identified the evil agenda behind these liberal education institutions like Harvard and their donors in the back, which is the Wall Street and Silicon Valley industrial complex. Trump sees the negative effects these institutions could have on one nation state. Trump could see these organizations and people like Luana Zhang as parasitic organisms that wants to infiltrate the mind, that wants to infiltrate the brains of nation states. USA just become their first and biggest victim. I think we should align with Trump's MAGA movement. Trump is rejecting these NGOs. We should also be rejecting these NGOs. Let's come to the fundamentals. I think from that 三联周刊 article, which is literally a PR brainwash article for her. I don't know how much money she paid for that. That lady said her dad donated a bunch of money to NGOs because her dad wants to conduct some very good deeds. Her dad wants to contribute to the society. First of all, what exactly is the well-being her dad did? And what exactly is the NGOs which her dad donated into? What exactly was the mission purpose of these NGOs? Right? Because we have seen what these so-called NGOs did to China. I think since early 2000s, these NGOs, they start to appear in the civil society in China. In the first glance, we thought these organizations were doing good to us. Then we realized, no, they have very evil agendas. They were trying to stir up the social divide among us. They were trying to stir up the hatred among different people in China. We have seen that, right? These NGOs, they were like the mere political instruments for these very wealthy people, the wealthy financial elites around the world. Their mission was to try to use these NGOs, package them, and infiltrate each nation states. I'll just give you one example. I think it was in Mongolia back in 2009 or something, that most evil Jewish person living right now, the George Soros, the guy who stirred up the 1997 Asian financial crisis. George Soros was manipulating an NGO in Mongolia to shut down, I think it was a local mining project. And the only reason for him to do that was because he had some ownership stake in that mining project. By utilizing that NGO to stop the project or to obstruct that mining project, he could extract more profits out of it. That's exactly the nature of these NGOs. And you could see in the past decade or so, these NGOs also trying to stir up the urban and rural hatred in China as well. And these NGOs were also the ones, especially I think you could see under the Obama administration and also under the Biden-Harris administration, they were the ones, provoking the the women and men hatred in China, this so-called feminist empowerment. They were not empowering anyone. They were only empowering their own evil agenda at the cost of the rest of all of us. And speaking of these feminist movements, they were mostly the color revolution playbooks from the American deep state, and also just from those NGOs. NGOs were like their pioneer vanguards of the color revolution. They were literally trying to divide us. If you look at places like Shanghai, especially among Gen Z, among younger generations, the situation is very dire. They use the media, they use some of the social media to brainwash people to the point that some of the young women would just like inherently and just naturally hate men, and out of no reason. These are very dire issues we have to face right now. And I think we as Chinese, we have to be brave enough to stand up together, to say no, to fight against that. And now speaking of Mongolia, which I think these women was interning at, do you know what Mongolia is? Mongolia is a nation that is hijacked by its historical vengeance and its populism government. And just like Ukraine after 2014, Mongolia is increasingly manipulated and controlled by these NGOs, the NGO agendas, which behind them, again, as I said, is people from Wall Street, is people from Davos. I think they might just use Mongolia as their another instrument, another pawn to stir up the border issue with China, to stir up the diplomacy crisis with China. So that way, these Wall Street elites, these American deep state, they could keep profiting from these crises, from these situations. And such a coincidence that this lady, Luana Jiang, she happens to be interned at the Mongolia's president or prime minister's office. Now, I think our big sister, Dong Minzhu, I think she does have some point right now that she said a bunch of these foreign educated people are spies. When she first said that, I thought she was joking. Now, I think increasingly she has some point here.
But despite everything, everything that we have discussed today, that couldn't it be the case that she just exploited the historical opportunity during COVID, which the Chinese people find it difficult to go to America and enter a program in Harvard that is not that competitive?
I think first of all, she said like during her application to Harvard, her admission to Harvard, she said she didn't use any like backdoor channels. I think we would first even disregard like the unfair competitive advantage which she holds, which is that, like she has these letters from the so-called NGOs, reference letters from NGOs. And also she, her family, enjoys fairly well economic conditions above most of the Chinese families, right? Let's disregard that for now. Let's put it aside. She is the product of a reverse discrimination policies conducted by the American establishments, especially after the 2008 financial crisis. When the American financial elites, they were trying to cover up the mess which they left to the American people and also to the entire world. They started to devise these whole delusional deranged policies like so-called DEI, like diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's basically a reverse discrimination mechanism using these like gender quotas and racial quotas in the United States. For instance, in the job market, or in these, Harvard, these higher education institutions. I think it was Wharton School of Business. Their quota each year for the Chinese students was 80% of women and 20% of men. And that outcome is not based on the natural selection. It's not based on the natural merit of each candidate. No, it is arbitrarily set up quota by these American deep state elites, by these Wall Street financial elites. They use these mechanisms to try to weaken the potential of these, very bright young candidates, especially from China, because they are scared of China. Think about, all these all these very ultra competitive Chinese males coming to the States, receive the best education, and they are brave enough, they are patriotic enough to go back to China and develop our own nation. That would be the biggest nightmare for American elites. So that's the reason why they would rather pick someone like Luana Jiang, who is literally out of the touch with this world and who is hypocritic in essence, in nature. So that way she becomes the best pawn for them. She becomes the best pawn for these Wall Street running elites. So once she gets brainwashed enough, So she become their foot soldier for this so-called globalist crusade. And they will go back to China. She will preach these Wall Street or globalist agendas to the rest of us. And they want to transform all the nation states, China included, into the papist state. They want to awaken us. They want to awaken our nations, awaken our communities, awaken our societies. That's the truly tremendous, dangerous point here. And that's why I have to urge here for all the Chinese, and especially with younger generation, we literally have this tremendous historical responsibility lying ahead of us. The West, and especially those Jewish special interest groups that are spanning globally in the Wall Street, in the Silicon Valley, they are trying to infiltrate us. They are trying to inject their parasitic mechanisms into our nation, into our culture. And the 21st century isn't a battle, isn't a competition between armies. It's a battle and a competition between the thoughts, between the ideas. We have to hold firm with our own ideas. We have to protect our culture, our nation at any cost possible. So the first step is to identify these evil parasites like Luana Zhang, reject them, dispose them, get rid of them. Only by cleaning the ground, we can pave a tremendous and prosperous future for us, for China, and then for the rest of the world.
Even if she wanted to go to NGO because she couldn't find a job in the investment banking, but her decision to leave investment banking isn't itself represents a good thing.
I think, as I said, she wasn't leaving the investment banking by choice. That company was, the Credit Suisse was literally bankrupted by its own flaws and also by the inherent flaws of the Western capitalist system. She was literally trying to search for another high payroll, not because out of compassion, but was because she was out of the choices. Then the other thing, you said she was idealistic. I don't think so. In Chinese, we have a term called 精致的利己主义者. I think that term, I don't even know how to translate to English, but I think that describes very well about these people. They have no ideals. If they have any ideal, their only ideal is to maximize the utility, maximize the profits for themselves. Their form can be different. They are just literally like the imperialistic empires back in the 19th century. They were trying to scramble all the resources across the world, in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, in South America, all the other places. The only difference being they have packaged differently in the 21st century. Now it's like their left hand was trying to grab all the benefits out of you. They were trying to exploit you, exploit your labor. While on the other hand, they were holding a loudspeaker and saying, you see, we are standing on the morally righteous ground. We are standing on the morally high ground. And you all have to follow us. If you do not follow us, then you are not tolerant. You are not open. You are not democratic. Don't you see that playbook? We have seen that playbook for at least 2 or 3 decades. I think when that playbook first appeared in China, I think some of us were fooled by them. Even myself, I thought these agendas were actually coming out of some good hearts. But now it's 2025. I think all of us should be smart enough. We should all open our eyes and to see that these are just merely the 19th century imperialistic activities packaged with the 21st century PR language. Even in China, there's like a bunch of these liberal-leaning magazines, like, as I said, 三联周刊, they are part of them. I think these magazines, you shouldn't even regard them as a Chinese magazine. You should regard them as part of this globalist financial elites group. Again, there is nothing idealistic about that lady Luana Zhang. Why not? She becomes, like the what's that called? Like the entry level official in one of the Chinese village, in one of the very rural areas, and she will stay there for 5 years without any chance of promotion, without any prospect of promotion. But in return, she could really do actual works for these people who are, underprivileged. How about that? If she's truly that idealistic, close her social media account, stop grabbing the attention, stop, attracting the attention from all of us. Stop using the media to validate her status. She will just act silently, now goes to a Chinese countryside, a very rural countryside, and actually help the people on the ground for 5 years. Can she do that?
Probably not. But this is still a question that I think it remains unaddressed, is that what is actually wrong with NGO? But shouldn't China be more tolerant?
Okay, I think I love your question because I can segment your question into two parts. First of all, let's do the American plot part. America has always been trying to, I think especially since 1980s and 90s, since our so-called like market opening and reform, America, especially their deep state, has always been trying to overthrow us. They were always trying to divide China. Their so-called color revolution was first targeting places like Xinjiang and Tibet, right? They were trying to stir up these like ethnic tensions between ethnic Han and like ethnic Tibetans and ethnic Uyghurs. But luckily, I think our government is smart enough and is strengthful enough to stop these secessionist movements. So we succeeded on that. However, there's one critical window that we sort of missed, was that these Western color revolution plots, they transformed itself. They packaged themselves now as these feminism movement or so-called female empowerment in China. Because I think for any rational human being, right, we are all good-hearted people. So if someone goes to my face and saying that, okay, we want to empower women, you naturally, and I naturally, we would think that's a good agenda, right? We would think that's a good thing, right? We want to support women. However, that's the most dangerous part about this Western plot. They were merely just like packaging this so-called women empowerment to stir up the social hatred. Now, especially in the tier 1 cities in China, the hatred between like women and men, especially in the younger generation, is outrageous. We cannot ignore that. I think that's the first point. Secondly, speaking of the NGO, you said like, why can't China just be more tolerant toward NGO? I think we first have to think, why does the NGO exist? NGO exists is primarily because the government is not effective enough. The governing institutions, the governing agencies are not strengthful, resourceful enough to tackle the challenges and issues in people's life. However, as we all know, the Chinese government is literally the most effective political institutions in the world. And our government, all the way from national level to the county, to the village level, are resourceful enough to solve the issue, to implement the policy directions from the top, all the way from top to the bottom. So why do we need an NGO in the first place? That is also the issue which the West has been facing for the past several decades, because there was an idea that the West does not need a big government. So these civic institutions, these civil institutions like NGOs could just fill up their place. But now you could see they have been hijacked. The UK government, they are not even able to set up or run the public schools. They outsourced all these to those so-called NGOs. But as I said, these NGOs, they are not actually non-profit institutions, because in the back, they have all these corporate donors, which have their very private interests.
She has plenty of support in the female gender community. So what is our message?
I think first of all, as you actually look into the comments, I think most of the Chinese women, like this time, we are all objecting against this lady named Luana Zhang. So if there's a plot behind her speech, I don't think she has done that. She has successfully fulfilled her mission. That's the first point. The other thing is that I do urge, I think the Chinese media sphere right now, especially, we should leverage this incident. We should leverage this issue. We should leverage this event to come to the realization, come to the urgency of the realization that the Western feminist empowerment agenda has been infiltrating us for years. Now we are already at the critical juncture where if we don't truly address these issues nationwide, there will be more dire consequences in China from within. So it's a time for us to wake up and address it and to confront it. Men and women, Chinese men and women, there's only one mission they should do, and that is to love each other. That is to form families, to have children together, raise up the children, and contribute our talents, contribute our wisdom, contribute our hardworking labor to the society, to our nation, so that we could fulfill our mission in the 21st century. We will literally become the leading power in the 21st century. We will solve all the issue, all the mess left by the Western capitalist system. We will reshape the global economy. We will reshape the world order. We will reshape and we will direct the future destiny of the humankind.